I've seen on the speedrun subreddit some indie developers saying like, I've made this game specifically for speedrunning. I feel like that probably won't turn out so well.
This is DannyB.
Let's f***ing go!
He's an Ocarina of Time speedrunner with record times in many of the game's categories, and the current leader for the any% glitchless category. I sat down with Danny to have a conversation about what speedrunners actually want from game developers. And to my surprise, none of his responses were about in-game timers, skippable cutscenes, or global leaderboards.
Those are good tools to add, but like to try to decide ahead of time what sorts of things will help or hurt speedrunners is really hard.
A lot of what Danny talked about was much more fundamental to a game's design, and it all started with a game's movement. Alright, so Danny, one thing that I've heard you say on stream before is that Ocarina of Time manages to make movement interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by that and how Ocarina of Time achieves that?
Yeah, so I think that movement being interesting is just a result of having your game have a lot of mechanics, right? Like if you just keep adding ways for players to interact with your game and you make sure that those mechanics can interact with each other, then all of a sudden, 5 mechanics that can each interact with each other is 125 different interactions that you've added into your game just because you added 5 things. And that just like emergent complexity makes it so interesting as a player, because all of a sudden you have so many options with only a few things that you actually need to be able to be capable of yourself.
And if you look at the rest of the most popular games to speedrun, that does seem to be a common thread. People enjoy running games that have deep, complex movement. Games like Super Mario 64 with its huge arsenal of jumping and movement abilities, or games like Minecraft where people are doing stuff like this.
Whoa.
And even in games that aren't packed with mechanics, like Portal or Getting Over It, that core movement mechanic is still deep enough to give you the complexity to make it interesting. And more importantly, fun.
And that's why you'll find games like Mario consistently at the top, because just moving Mario is fun, and that is why the speedruns are fun.
So Danny, what I'd like to talk about next is randomness in speedrunning. Do you think it's something that adds flavor to a speedrun? Do you think there can be too much, too little? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that if a game is too heavily dependent on randomness for success, that can be a real killer. And I think a lot of good speedruns do have a fun luck element that like bring a bit of excitement to it. But I think if there's too much, then that's a real downer. If I can boil everything down to my own skill and my own decisions and my own mistakes, that's really compelling for me. I love that.
Obviously, Danny's not speaking for the entire speedrunning community. There are plenty of people out there who play games that are dependent on luck for a good run. Just take a look at Mario Kart 64. Even if you play the game perfectly, there's only a very slim chance of getting all the perfect items you need to set yourself up for a winning run. I saw one person who described Mario Kart speedruns as grinding a Mario-themed slot machine, which seems pretty accurate. So if you are a game developer thinking about making a game for speedrunners, just take some time to think about the amount of randomness that you want to put into your game.
What?
There might not be a right or wrong answer, but just understand that too much can definitely turn some people off of the game.
Are you f***ing kidding me? F***ing Caterpie? For f***ing sake, get the f*** you lose a f***ing run to a little f***ing piece of worm like that.
Alright, so Danny, tell me what you think about game developers who try to tailor their games specifically towards speedrunners.
So it's tricky, right? Because I think a big part of speedrunning is gamers finding the challenges and the goals and the metagaming that they find fun, and then making speedruns out of those challenges, right? Like I've seen on the speedrun subreddit some indie developers saying like, I've made this game specifically for speedrunning. I feel like that probably won't turn out so well, because like 90% of the fun of speedrunning is finding all the ways to make the speedrun fun and different from how the game was intended to be played. And so if you make your game specifically for speedrunning at the outset, then that can sort of pigeonhole it a little bit.
And for a perfect example of this, let's look at a game called Extricate, which is exactly what Danny described. A game designed explicitly for speedrunning, where all you do is zip through levels as fast as possible. Since your only goal in this game is just go fast, there really aren't any secondary items or mechanics for you to play around with. And since there's nothing to play around with, there's nothing to break or exploit. There's no room for creativity. But then compare that to a game like Ocarina of Time, where the most random items become the most game-breaking, and these small little details open up tons of possibilities that the game developers never even intended. So what practical advice can a game developer take from this? Well, I would say this. Don't limit your game to just speeding through a level as quickly as possible. Add minigames, add puzzles, add characters and side quests and missions. Add depth and richness to your game that goes beyond the basic speedrunning strats. Because really, you have no way of knowing if a random blue chicken that you put in the game is going to be the thing that blows your game wide open. One thing I've noticed is that there's a big overlap between games that are popular to speedrun and games that are just like already popular, right? So do you think that a game's popularity is one of the biggest factors in whether people speedrun it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you said, popularity independently of speedruns is a really big factor. But I think that personal relationship to a game can also play a big role, despite whether or not the game may be popular otherwise. So, like, if you grow up with a game and it means a lot to you and you have a lot of emotional investment in it, you know, it's something that you're just going to be picking up. And I think that if you're going to be playing a game like that over and over again, you know, it just leads on a path to speedrunning. I think a lot of the best games for speedrunning are ones that people get really emotionally invested in the first place. I think Ocarina of Time, you know, despite its huge popularity, a lot of people have a really intense personal connection to a game like that.
I think this final insight might be the most important takeaway of this entire video. A lot of developers probably fall into the trap of thinking, since speedrunners just skip through cutscenes and plot points and story, that none of that stuff matters to them, but that is not true. What developers are forgetting is that the first and most important step of fostering a speedrunning community for your game is creating a game that people fall in love with. So if you're a game developer who's thinking about making a game for speedrunners, I mean, definitely go for it. You can add in the level timers and the leaderboards and all those little quality of life improvements. But above all else, make a game that has heart and depth. Make a game that's so good that once you beat it, you just want to pick it up and play it again and again and again and again and again, because that is the heart of speedrunning. And if you've ever considered doing speedruns of Ocarina of Time, now is probably the best time ever to get into it. Speedrunning strategies are more accessible now than they ever have been before, thanks to Danny's newest project.
I've been trying to give back a little bit more to the speedrunning community. I spent some time putting together this platform called StratDB. It's free to use. You can upload videos related to your game and tag them with all sorts of information. It can be really hard as a newer speedrunner, or even a veteran speedrunner, to try to find, you know, that one video that you think might exist out there that will explain this really obscure strategy. And so it's a really good way both for discovery, for, like, you know, surfacing things that you might have otherwise not found, and also recall, like knowing exactly what you're looking for and being able to find it at a moment's notice.
Thank you so much to Danny for doing this interview with me. He really is just a great guy who wants to see his community flourish, and he did all this out of the kindness of his heart, so really appreciate that. I'll put the link to his Twitch down in the video description, but that's all for today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.